Hey guys, it's me from the past. Or the future of the past. I don't know. It's me from a different time from when the stream was. Because I decided that the YouTube VODs should be separated by chapter instead of just uploading the stream as it was. So this is slightly different than how it went on Twitch. Also, if you're interested in checking out the live stream of me reading Year of the Black Rainbow by Claudio Sanchez and Peter David, please check out my Twitch. It's twitch.tv/bizarre_Bryn. We typically stream on Sundays at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. A few of those dates vary due to life and scheduling and things, but follow me on Instagram and I'll post when those dates and times change. Yeah. Anyway, hope you enjoy it. Bye. Or wait here and listen. So I guess we're going to do chapter 2 and chapter 3 because that was a short chapter, but we learned more about Ryan, so that's cool. He is a bad guy. He's a mage. We've now met some mages. We hadn't really met mages before this, so that's exciting. And the mages don't like Ryan, but they like Ryan? No, Marth doesn't like Ryan, but other people seem to be okay with him, and Marth thinks that he's going to end the universe. And also, remember, this book is the prequel to everything that happens in the comics, so if the world's ending already. So, yeah, cool. That was fun, and that was shorter than I expected it. I hope I remember what Marth's voice is, and I'm sorry that Ryan didn't really have one. I was not expecting such an intense turn from chapter 1 when we got back to the spaceship to like a completely different world with mages and books and libraries and gory paintings about Armageddon. Oh, was that like deep in the past? We're going to find some stuff out. Year of the Black Rainbow by Claudio Sanchez and Peter David. Chapter 3. Guns of Summer. For a time, Wilhelm Ryan ruled over Sector 6 peacefully, but eventually the rumors of the Red Army became tangible, the threat moving from abstract concept to reality. The mages saw it as an offensive move towards their power. All that was required was for matters to reach a tipping point that would send them spilling into a full-blown mage war. Eventually, Ryan decided that he would take over Sector 10 and its 6 territories. Ryan abruptly demanded an audience with the other mages, who then witnessed his assassination of Mage Rolander Guarch, the governor of Sector 10. Later known as the Guarch Example, this would serve as Ryan's declaration of war. Sector 12 was subsequently conquered, and its mage, Lytton Boss, was also murdered in cold blood by Ryan. Mage Althadius Favor, overseer of Sector 1, and renowned for his stronghold of House... God damn it, all these songs. Okay, sorry. Sector 12 was subsequently conquered, and its mage, Lytton Boss, was also murdered in cold blood by Ryan. Mage Althadius Favor, overseer of Sector 1 and renowned for his stronghold of House Atlantic, would become an ally of Ryan's, seeking to join forces with who he saw as the strongest of the mages, as opposed to Ryan's most relentless opponent, Covent Marth. I made it. We got through it. The war dragged on, leaving sectors scorched in their wake, for mages Hanthan Joseph and Malvis Limby of northern sectors 2 and 3 surrendered to Ryan. Only then did Ryan realize the potential of an imprisoned mage, and the mages themselves became as valuable as the sectors he worked to overtake. He tested out a new tactic by flooding Sector 5 with Red Army military who were solely concerned with taking Mage Brand Wilsinger hostage. The strategy was unexpected and successful, and Ryan had no problem impeding it with Zai Talender of Sector 7. Simultaneously, his slow assault was setting the stage for a smaller civil war known as the War of the Western Third. This would be a desperate attempt by remaining Western Sectors 8, 9, and 11 to break away from the Union and maintain a coalition. They would bravely fight back as a single entity to stop him. And they would nearly succeed. Nearly. Instead, Ryan would barely escape death, alive but wounded for the first time in the wars. Instead of venting his rage towards the mages responsible, he channeled it into a new assaults that netted him Mages Chu Valentar and Beirut Akara. Mage Grave Minotaur of Sector 9 vanished, eluding Ryan's subsequent search for him. Rumors would circulate for centuries about the missing mage, speculating as to where he had narrowly escaped, where no other had, or simply ended his own life on his own terms. Eventually, Ryan sought after Althadia's favor in the confines of House Atlantic. The specifics of the encounter were never known, but Favor never heard from again, and Ryan took over the House Atlantic. It was said that Favor was imprisoned along with the other missing mages, somewhere within the dark corridors of House Atlantic, the victim of some unholy experiment of Ryan's, but no one knew for sure. Mages did not want to know. And still, Covent Marth remained elusive and eventually became the last hope of stopping Ryan's plans. In the meantime, the collateral damage of the Mage Wars was reaching a level that most found unacceptable, and they were beginning to protest. Loudly. Okay. Cool. Got you. I've got some timeline questions, but we're going to double check those in the future. One moment. Leonard Hohenberger's life came to an end on an otherwise ordinary day, which is not to say that he died that day. Nevertheless, his life, or at least his life as he knew it, came to a violent and bitter end as a result of circumstances that he could not possibly have anticipated, and certainly not desired. These circumstances, in turn, would lead to the eventual destruction of everything he loved and believed in, and changed the arc of Heaven's fence. He did not know any of that when he awoke that morning in his home on Apathy Prime. He yawned and stretched and yawned once more, looking over the left side of the bed and seeing an empty space that had been occupied by his wife, Pearl, during the night. She was up and out early, as was typical for her. Once upon a time, that might well have annoyed the hell out of him. He was old-fashioned and was enamored with the notion of his wife being there to wake up to. He had long ago come to terms with the fact that his beloved Pearl was, God help him, one of those people, i.e., a morning person. Once he had loathed those types, those damnable morning people. Now he chose to find it charming, as far as his wife was concerned. Hohenberger took a full minute to stretch, as was his wont. Pearl kidded him that most men are satisfied with a fart and then a belch before staggering out of bed. Not Hohenberger. His lifelong study of every aspect of human biology served to remind him that the most heart attacks take place first thing in the morning. So he always made sure to take the proper amount of prep time in getting his body started. First he would wiggle his fingers and his toes, and then methodically stretch every muscle in his body until he felt his pulse rate was properly up to speed. Then, and only then, would he consider the day to have started. A hustling form moved quickly past the open door of the bedroom, so fast that Hohenberger almost didn't spot it. He did, however, and his mind operated quickly enough that not only did he know who it was, but was quite certain he knew where the individual was off to. "Joseph!" he shouted. The young man who had just been summoned froze where he was and slowly backed up. He looked abashed. His lanky brown hair was hanging in his face. He knew that drove his father's nuts, so he shoved it out of his eyes. "Yeah?" Noting that his son was fully dressed at an unusually early hour of the morning, and also noting the young man's haste, Hohenberger did not have to be a detective to know what was going on. "Joseph, you're not..." "Dad, I have to." "Joseph!" He did not need this aggravation first thing in the morning. He rubbed the bridge of his nose and said with a low moan, "Joseph, we've gone over this." "Gone over this" makes it sound like we've just had some kind of discussion. Telling me repeatedly that I can't do something isn't a discussion. For God's sake, Dad, I'm 17. You say that as if it's supposed to impress me. Your mother will... She doesn't need to know. "Joseph, come on." "Dad, I promised the guys." He fumbled for the words that slowly persuaded his father to the rightness of his cause. "There's not going to be a problem. It's a demonstration." "It's a peace demonstration. Come on, Dad. Anyone with half a brain knows what really is going on, and you've got more than half a brain." "Flattery will only get you so far, but go on," his father said with a little half-wink. Joseph stared at him intently, and Hohenberger was struck, not for the first time, of how much of his mother's attitude and looks he had. "Dad, all those years you spent telling me the importance of standing up for what I think is right, was it all bullshit?" "Language," Hohenberger said stiffly. "Were they just words then? Cheap talk that could be tossed aside when things got tough?" "Apparently so." "And what other things did you teach me growing up that I can just ignore when it's inconvenient, huh? All that, stuff about morality and hard work and fidelity to a wife and ethics and..." "I get the point, Joseph, but..." "But what?" Joseph lowered his voice as if concerned that someone was spying upon them. Come on, Dad. You know we're on the same side. You hate this whole war what the mages are doing, not only to each other, but also to whatever bystanders happen to get in the way. Hell, the mages themselves have to know that we're not just going to roll over and to take whatever they feel like dishing out. Someone, a lot of someones, have to stand up and say enough. Someone has to say, you've been given all this power for a reason. That reason is to serve and protect the rest of us who don't have such power. It has to be used for the common good, as part of your mandate in overseeing the 12 sectors. We need full disclosure. Full disclosure. There are rumors, Dad. You've heard them. Rumors that the mages are dead, or, he hesitated, or worse, that Wilhelm Ryan is out to take them all down, that he wants to seize control over everything for God knows why, because he's power mad. Whatever, look. Everybody knows that the local governments just pave the roads to make the great machines keep running smoothly, that they do the work the mages don't want to be bothered with, but the affairs of the mages are running roughshod over the people, and if the government isn't going to step up and stop it, then we're going to, in the only way that matters. By what? A show of force? Do you seriously think you're going to take up arms against the mages, or the mages' armed forces? It's not about taking up arms. I'm a pacifist, remember? It's about showing the mages that there are always alternatives to war, that displaying an organized show of will and desire can be a guide to a better way of living. We don't want to be led by a force of arms. Arms and fighting and wars are a negative example. We want to show a positive example. We want to say no more wars. We want to say power for the people, not against the people, and... All right. It still sounds a bit nebulous to me, but... The doctor shook his head. God, just like your mother. What? Nothing. Just hold up a few minutes. I'll come with you. No way. Joseph. It's going to be really crowded there, Dad. You know how you are with crowds, and if I have to worry about you, then we both might be in danger. Besides, what are my friends going to think if my dad has to tag along with me? Fine, said Hohenberger. Look, just be careful, all right? Just be extremely careful and stay out of harm's way. Absolutely, Dad. Thanks. Joseph said with a grin and even tossed off a salute as he hurried away from the front door of the house. Not even out of bed, and I've already likely screwed up the day, Hohenberger thought. He rose, stumbled to the bathroom, showered, and pulled his shoulder-length jet-black hair into a damp ponytail. His fellow researchers loved to tease him about his long locks, joking that he looked more like a poet than an award-winning scientist. For Hohenberger, his hair was less about looks and more about the hour he couldn't bear to waste getting his hair cut every month. Instead, he opted for the requisite trim once every 6 to 8. He carefully stepped into his clothes. He had 5 pairs of identical slacks, shirts, and jackets hanging in the closet. This way, he did not have to waste any brain cells on trying to decide what to wear when he went into his laboratory. Hohenberger strode into the kitchen and absently tossed some cereal into his mouth, followed by a glass of milk. It struck him as a more efficient way to consume the food than mixing one with the other beforehand. He stared thoughtfully into space, thinking about nothing in particular. He had found that it was during such voids that some of his best ideas took place. He reached for his pad on the far edge of the kitchen table, dragged it over to himself, and began sketching on it. Nothing concrete at first, just an assortment of formulae that he had hoped would lead to something. His thoughts had been triggered by some of the vids he had seen lately, resulting from the Mage Wars. They were nothing official, of course. Officially, the Mage Wars were typically referred to as internal disputes among the mages. The Great Debate was the official term, as if the mages all grouped together around a table discussing issues of the day rather than trying to annihilate each other, steal their respective powers, and turn them into, well, he wasn't sure what. There were rumors, certainly, but that was all. Still, anyone with half a brain had to know that there was more going on than anyone in any official capacity was willing to admit to. Hohenberger had to think that the government believed that the general populace had to be raging idiots. On the other hand, it was an open secret that the government was a joke. They were nothing more than the elected paper pushers, embracing red tape, while the mages were the ones who truly ran things. All major decisions went through the mages, and they were the ones who decided the direction of humanity, pulling the strings of the government and typically content to be the puppeteers. Hohenberger, however, saw the strings. He had no intention of doing anything about it, and he was a scientist, a researcher, not a string cutter. String cutting was a young man's game, and although he was only what some might call middle-aged, Hohenberger had been very much feeling the weight of his years upon him lately. Naturally, when he thought of young man, his thoughts turned back to Joseph. Before he could let them wander down the path to its natural conclusion and thus prompt more worries about his son's well-being, he was startled out of his free association reverie by a howl of what sounded like triumph, although it might have been agony. Nope. It was never easy to tell with Pearl. The howl was followed by a series of demented cackles. Hohenberger caught up from the table and headed towards the greenhouse. At least that's what he called it. Pearl had a far more involved and convoluted name for it that incorporated all manner of technical terms involving the studying of insect life that she was cultivating there. Hohenberger had little patience for it. He tended to believe in calling things by simple terms so everyone would know what everyone else was talking about. Lack of communication was directly responsible for most of man's ills. Why make it harder to understand the everyday things? He nervously strolled into the greenhouse and was immediately hit by the overwhelming moisture and humidity. It made his nostril hairs curl as it typically did. He couldn't see Pearl because of the overgrowth of leaves and brush. It had been her desire to try and replicate as much as humanly possible a jungle environment. And in that, she had succeeded. There was a distant cawing of birds, but they were there exclusively for mood. Pearl would have had a fit if even a single actual bird were present in her little corner of the world, since the birds would by nature feast upon the things that truly mattered to her. The cackling had subsided to a few mild chortles. "Pearl?" he called cautiously. "Is everything okay, honey?" "Mask and gloves!" Her voice came back to him from some dampened place within. "But I don't—" "Mask and gloves!" He knew better than to argue with her. A large screened helmet with a thick pair of gloves were hanging on the two hooks next to the door. The other was vacant, indicating that Pearl was wearing its contents. With a sigh, he pulled on the helmet and the gloves and made his way to the general direction of where her voice was coming from. It took a bit of rummaging around, because voices tended to echo, and so it wasn't always easy to locate a speaker. But he was aided with Pearl's helpful comment of, "Turn right, dummy!" He did so at his first opportunity and found Pearl halfway down the aisle. She was wearing the same encompassing helmet and gloves that he was. I skipped lines. A few auburn strands of her hastily pulled together bun had come loose and fallen down under the glass of her helmet to frame her angular face. It made him smile because he remembered when he had first acquired them. After she'd been stung by an insect that she'd been studying. He had teased her about it. Oh. Flashback, sorry. In response that evening, she strolled into the living room wearing nothing but the mask, the gloves, and nothing else. As his gaze caressed every porcelain white curve of her shapely body, she had heard, "How do you like them now?" Since he'd never made another snide comment about her ensemble, although he still did ask her to wear it under special circumstances, as he called it. Now she had her gloved index finger extended, and there was some manner of insect balanced delicately upon it. Pearl was wearing the same type of protective helmet that her husband was, but even behind the obscuring mesh, he could see the look on her face practically dancing with triumph. He noticed that there was a cocoon hanging nearby that had been broken open. Something inside had crawled out and into the world, and he came to the reasonable conclusion that whatever had been residing within the cocoon was now adorning Pearl's finger. "I did it," she said triumphantly. Pearl was the polar opposite of her husband when it came to discussing projects on which she was working. Cat moment. That cat. Hi. Hi, baby. One moment. She's so fat. It's that cat. She doesn't want to play. It's okay. That's her butt. Okay. Okay, bye. "I did it," she said triumphantly. Pearl was the polar opposite of her husband when it came to discussing projects on which she was working. Hohenberger tended to provide her with constant updates, passing thoughts, failures, and successes, all of it as it happened, the good, the bad, and ugly. Pearl preferred to wait until she had genuine results, positive, typically, since she despised dwelling on failure, and then share them with Leonard. He knew that she had been up to something with her new insects, and she had refused to go into specifics. Now, though, she was far less reticent. He leaned forward, studying it closely. It was eerily beautiful, its green wings fluttering and catching the light in such a way that seemed iridescent. "Some sort of dragonfly?" he said tentatively. "It's called a syringa." And why precisely would you call it that?" "Because," she said, and held it up so that he could see it more clearly. It has a stinger, see? A stinger, he stated, and that is unusual? For this type of insect? Absolutely, considering that I genetically constructed it while it was still in its chrysalis stage. Really? You grafted a stinger on it while it was still in the cocoon? Yes, sir. And he hesitated. Why? I mean, what's the purpose? The purpose? Of the stinger. Why give it a stinger? To see if I could, and to see what properties it would generate. Don't stingers generally have the same properties, self-defense mechanisms that inflict toxins upon those who attack it? When nature generates it, yes. When a human creates it, on the other hand. And the smile on her face spread even wider, which she would not have thought possible. The result could be, well, anything. Plus, naturally, I want to see if it breeds true. You mean pass the mutation off to its offspring? Exactly. And you're my inspiration. She patted the side of his helmet. All your talk of gene tinkering inspired me. Yes, but mine's mostly talk, he said, studying the dragonfly. The progress you've made is with insects. You have ambitions for human beings, and that's a little more complicated. Still, and she turned the syringe this way and that to study it more closely. I can't wait to show this to Joseph. Is he awake yet? He shifted uncomfortably. Leonard, her voice dropped, all the joy and enthusiasm ebbing from it. Where's Joseph? Listen. He didn't. Pearl, you need to listen to. He did not go out of this house to that rally, and you're not going to tell me that you allowed it. All of the joy, all of the ebullience that she had displayed before had dissipated. You are not going to tell me that. Pearl, the boy presented a solid argument over— Oh my God, Leonard. She shook the beloved syringe off her hand as if it were a germ, the startled insect flittering to get its bearings for a moment, then darted off. She didn't appear to be giving it the slightest further thought. Instead, she was heading for the door, yanking off her protective mask. She didn't even bother with the hook. She just dropped it, putting the gloves off as well and allowing them to fall to the floor. Leonard hurried after her as quickly as he could go. It was amazing how much ground Pearl could cover when she was upset about something. Pearl, he called after her. She paid him no mind. She emerged from the greenhouse, Hohenberger right after her. He was in such a hurry that he had neglected to remove the protective covering. Pearl, you have to listen to me. Like you listened to me? Like you let Joseph listen to me? I told you. And take that helmet off. He did as she ordered, feeling a bit foolish. He pulled it off and tried to speak. Pearl didn't allow him the opportunity. You know how dangerous this situation is, Leonard? You, of all people, know how things can escalate out of control incredibly quickly. Do you really want our son in the middle of that? Obviously not, but he's almost a grown man, Pearl. We have to allow him to make some decisions about his life, especially when there are greater issues to be considered. I want my son to live to become an actual grown man instead of almost. He could be killed, Leonard. Do you want that? He tried to meet her gaze but couldn't. Instead, he stared down at the floor. No, of course not. Fine. Then let's go to that rally and get our son out of there. The prospect of facing crowds was no more alluring to Hohenberger than it had been when Joseph had mentioned it. The prospect of telling his wife that she was on her own, however, was not an option. It's that cat! She's here! She is cuddly! Talking to the microphone. Mom is going to kill me. The shirt's ruined. It was odd that despite the chaos that was ensuing around him, that was the thought that kept going through Joseph's mind. There was a scream nearby. It had to be a damned loud one to stand out for Joseph, considering the surrounding racket. The air was alive with explosions of pulsar fire ripping through the air and the sound of it hitting people. That was the surprising thing to Joseph, that distinctive sound, that spulch noise as the pulse blasts cut through skin and muscle and bone and just ripped people apart with such a ferocity that, when enough blasts hit home, they were scarcely recognizable as people anymore. Instead, they were just sacks of meat that had once had hopes and dreams and aspirations, but now were useless for anything except for as food for the packs of stray dogs that occasionally wandered the streets. I did not think that he's a pacifist. This is a peaceful protest. Okay. These aren't beanbag guns. They're just exploding people. It's fine. Everything's fine. It's fine. Okay. The blasts made totally different sounds when they ricocheted off the armor of the soldiers as they fired away at each other without the slightest regard for who was in between them. That's what this was all about, for fuck's sake. This was all about protecting people from exactly this. This is just ironic, is what this is. Ironic, or maybe just crap luck. Something or someone hit the ground a few feet away from him. He recognized her immediately. It was Elizabeth Parks. "Lizzie?" he tried to say, but he couldn't get anything resembling a voice to emerge from between his lips. Lizzie stared at him lifelessly. Blood was pouring out from her nose and through her mouth. Joseph couldn't help but think about all the times he had fantasized about kissing that mouth. There was a huge gaping wound in the side of her head, and there was something thick and gray and gelatinous seeping through it. The remnants of the sign that had the words, "End the Mage Wars," emblazoned across it was laying next to her. Only the word "end" was now visible. The air was thick with the stench of blood and death and bodies lying in the heat of the keywork. And there was more than enough death to go around. That much was certain. Someone ran past him, accidentally kicking him as they went. They didn't slow or offer an apology. They probably thought he was dead. Suddenly, the person who had kicked him was lifted off his feet, a pulsar blast ramming through him, driving through his back and blasting his intestines out through his front. He went down in a heap. Serves him right, thought Joseph, who on some level couldn't quite believe how detached from the insanity he had become. The town square had been packed with people, with protesters waving their signs and chanting and acting as if they were some big damned holiday rather than attempting to make a serious point. And now they were scattering like cockroaches, moving in all directions, but a darkened room was abruptly illuminated. We were protesting in the abstract. That's what this is really all about. They were all abstract, and suddenly it got real. This way, Titan formation! Seaward on point! A voice bellowed. Joseph couldn't tell who was doing the shouting, nor did he particularly care. One of the murdering bastards was pretty much like another. He didn't know if it was Ryan's men who had Marth's men on the run or vice versa. Mustering his strength, Joseph said, "You weren't supposed to be here!" Except there was a vicious red... Okay. Did Joseph get shot? When did Joseph get shot? Except there was a vicious red-tinged liquid bubbling up from his lungs, and the words came out mumbled and slurred and incomprehensible to everyone except Joseph himself. He tried to stand, but Elizabeth's dead eyes remained upon him as everything below the neck ignored the commands being sent from above. Booted feet pounded past him, and pulsar blasts superheated the air, leaving the smell of burning flesh wafting up his nostrils. It seemed entirely too coincidental that the forces of Ryan and Marth had showed up at exactly this point in time. Ryan would have wanted this to stop. He wouldn't have wanted us to make our voices heard. Except that made no sense. Ryan was what he was. The man who had demented dreams of dubbing himself the Supreme Tri-Mage. Why would someone as self-aggrandizing as that give a damn what Joseph and his companions had to say? It seemed just as likely to have simply been malign fate that had betrayed them, sending their simple peace rally spiraling into actual armed conflict, the conflict that Joseph and the others were ill-suited to engage in. More screams, more pulsar blasts firing, a helmet crashed to the ground near Joseph and bounced away, blood trailing from it, and Joseph had just enough time to see the stump of a neck and realize that the helmet still had a head contained within. Then there was another heavy thud. It was a soldier clutching at a wound in his upper right leg. He sported the colors of Wilhelm Ryan. The helmet obscured most of his face, although his chin twitched slightly when he saw that Joseph was staring at him. "Stupid bastards, you had no business being here," the soldier said with a grunt before hauling himself to his feet. "No, you had no business being here. We had every right. We had every right to not live like this. We had a right not to have our lives lost at the whim of a power-crazed mages. We have... Oh, God, it hurts." His mind had disconnected from the agony, but now it was beginning to creep back. He dreaded the return of that pain, because he wasn't sure just how much, if any, he would be able to withstand. And then, suddenly, just like that, the pain that had been encroaching upon him was gone. He felt a swell of relief, followed by that exact same thought he had moments earlier, that his mother was going to kill him. His father wasn't going to be thrilled either. Worse, they were right. Then he heard a horrified shriek, practically in his ear. With all the insanity unfolding around him, it would have had to have been close to be audible. The voice was screaming, "Joseph! Joseph!" Which was a remarkable coincidence, because not only was his name Joseph, but it sounded remarkably like his mother. And then his mother's anguished face occupied his entire field of vision. Her face was a portrait of agonized misery. Tears rolling down her cheeks, she was gesturing wildly to someone, perhaps his father? And then she was shouting something at him. He could no longer hear her, though, because there was a pounding in his ears that was shutting everything else out, reduced to the distant, steady buzz. He could guess, though, what she was saying. He licked his lips, his tongue the only muscle in his body that he was still capable of manipulating. He tried to speak, but again, nothing comprehensible would emerge. And so, even though he was reasonably sure that he was not telepathic, he did everything he could to fire his thoughts directly into his mother's brain. I'm sorry. I think I ruined this nice shirt you bought for my birthday. Please don't kill me. And the haze of white settled over him, and everything, his mother, and Elizabeth's eyes, and the blood and the stench and gore was gone. His final thought was that he had never been happier than he was at this moment. And that's the end of the chapter. Wow. It's a lot. I feel like things escalate quickly. Because, like, I want to... Does Joseph die? I have not heard about Joseph. Also, one of the mages is named Joseph. Like, Joe, J-O, space, capital S, S-E-P-H. But, okay, I get it. He did get shot. They just didn't talk about how he got shot. They just talked about how he ruined his shirt and his mom's going to kill him. And now he's dead. Maybe. And I guess I'd have to look more specifically timeline-wise. I guess chapter 1 happened later and chapter 3 is in the past, because it sounds like Hohenberger hasn't figured out how to genetically modify people yet, but Coheed and Cambria have been genetically modified by Hohenberger. So the prologue is in the beginning. Chapter 1 is somewhere in the middle. Then we did another huge flashback into chapter 2, which is somewhere slightly later than... And this is why I should read things before I read them to you guys. Okay, so chapter 1 happened somewhere in the middle. And chapter 2 happened after the beginning. And that's when Wilhelm Ryan came to be. And then I guess, timeline-wise, chapter 3 happens after that because Wilhelm Ryan ruled over Sector 6 for a while. But this is before Hohenberger has learned how to genetically modify people, I guess. So I don't even think Coheed and Cambria are here yet. Is Joseph dead? Or is he just real hurt? Hohenberger's a doctor. Welcome! Welcome back to yet another day of different times. I edited these on different days and realized what pieces I needed for YouTube at the time of editing, and I did not plan for any of this because I don't know what my workflow is yet. Anyway, so that was the end of chapter 3. Thanks for watching it. It was a lot. We went to a lot of places, and at the end of the stream, I finally figured out the timeline. Let me know if you had those realizations at the same time that I did. Cool. So we're going to be uploading chapter 4 soon. If you enjoy this, hit the subscribe button, or don't. I have no idea how YouTube works. Leave a comment below if you want. I think that helps with engagement. We don't know. We're figuring it out. Either way, come back here for chapter 4. It's going to be uploaded soon. And if you want to tune into the live stream, you can check it out on Twitch. It's twitch.tv/bizarre_Bryn. I'll put that link probably down here. And it's listed in the description. The thing is that YouTube doesn't believe in me, so you have to copy and paste it out of the description, and you can't actually click on it. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks for watching it. Thanks for watching the VOD. I'm really excited to keep reading this book and to keep giving people the wrong voices. Okay. Bye.